go?
Oh, yeah, okay. So I've got pause, stop, and recording. So it must be recording.
Very good.
I can pause it.
This is recording.
Right.
Don't worry.
I think if Frazzle's frozen again.
I'll be set up real soon.
Cleve, you're frozen. I'm fine.
Oh.
Movement.
Oh.
We might be going to Skype, boys.
Yeah, everybody's moving there. Okay, now we're good. Okay, iron wire. Once I flame nano-coated that rebar tie wire, and I'm probably good to go. As far as I think.
Now, what do you mean? Did you temper it? Is that what you did? You stuck it in an oven for a little while and tempered it back down?
No, I just took it. I just made up my coils just like we do, and slide one inside the other, and then I just turned it upside down on the cast iron skillet. Took out my handy dandy propane torch and got her to where she snaked good the colors around it, chased from one end to the other, and then I threw her onto the gas stove to let the ionization going on, and it's cooking nice. It's looking good.
What I did once before, like you just said, I had the cast iron skillet and I had it on an electric burner, and I warmed it up real good. And then I was hitting it with the torch.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah, if you start with a cold skillet, it'll take a minute for the fry pan to warm up, but it heats up pretty fast. And pretty soon everything's cooking like it's supposed to. And as they say, yeah, you're cooking with gas, man. It's everything's going fine. So.
See, I always was a little leery with the gas because if you hit it wrong, all the coating blows off it.
Well, it's an art. It really is an art. And I burned up more coils than almost anybody I know of learning it. And I got to the point where, I was doing it hanging off of a direct to earth ground wire inside my little shed and standing there with my hands up in the air for 20 minutes straight, trying to chase it that way. That works. And I was watching the guys do it Chinese style, which was on a piece of granite rock. Yeah. And it was like, these are good. It was like, okay. So then I did it on the backside of a skillet here at work because I didn't want to go out to the shed because it was raining. And it was really good. I just hung it back up on I have a earth ground here on one of my benches, so I can just hook them up. It's not tied into the house current, and just let them cure. And if you do it wrong with your flame nano coating, the coating will bust off in about 4 to 6 hours or less. If you do it right, it starts looking better and better and better. It'll turn black or it'll turn that red brown color.
Yeah.
Either one's more magnetic, one's gravitational is what it is.
Okay.
And it has to do with polarity of where, how it cools.
Yeah.
But it's a good solid coat and works fine. I haven't had any problems with it doing it that way. But as I say, I've nano-coated everything every way that you can possibly think of, and just about every material you can think of. And each style has its application and what you use it on. It's like you don't want to use caustic on everything. Some things work better with flame, and some work better with electricity. So it's just or with a plasma. And this time, Kesh was at about 140. Well, about 150, I think it was. He was talking about basically using your either a battery or a plasma and the different wires, and how you set it up to nano-coat it. And current ones runs one direction, and then the nano-coating will seek its balance from a heavy concentration to a light concentration and coat everything else in between. So, yeah, same idea. It works the same way as when we're using a semi-permeable membrane and you fill the inside of it with salt and you drop it into another vat of water and you come back a few hours later and the salt has transferred through the membrane and equals out to the concentration of salt in the two. The concentrated salt gets weaker, and the area that was just straight water becomes salty. And the reverse osmosis process for purifying water works similar, but they put pressure on it, and it's such a fine membrane that the salt doesn't go through and the particulates don't go through.
Okay, I'm going to mute my mic, and you can run through all the steps with the static generator and the vortex you were laying out. And this way here.
You want to start with the stuff that we did today, or do you want to go and review 2 days ago stuff and come forward?
We'll start with the stuff today, then we'll go back. This way, Cleve can get an idea, and he can draw a lot of this stuff. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay. Basically, what was today was I was looking at the Schellenberg or whatever, coils and stuff, and the introduction to the toroid and the vortices on the toroids. And so it was just basically bringing me up to speed and letting you guys know that I may have been looking at something a little bit different in my perception before the video, and I think I may be seeing something that they're not seeing after the video. And so that's where, Cleve, you're gonna, let's see, I got to have, wrong screen. Now we get over to this one, bring mine up, so that's there. I want to share screen. It takes me a minute to get all the diagrams up. Let's take it. This is form to fly. Start with this one. And this is the cyclone in the jar diagram. And so that whenever you see this symbol and anything else that I've got rolling, you'll understand it's this picture in larger and smaller forms. When we take a look at the cyclone, and let me get a different color, use pink, we have to realize that the cyclone actually has just like it turns on a screw as it goes down into the point and drains out. And so if it's spinning around in one direction or the other, each of those lines is a separate, it's kind of like a rope going down in a tornado form. And what we're going to be looking for in the future is to be setting up these vortices that are very rope-like. And as he said, it looks like a ram's horn, and it just has that curl to it. And if you squish it together, it looks more like this cone shape. If you pull it apart, it looks more like a ram's horn. Okay. Oh, to something else. Share. Go to another photograph.
I actually have quite a few photographs of those that I've made myself. Fraz.
actually, photograph the ones that your tornado in a bottle.
Yeah, I've got photos of that as well.
Okay, which one do I want to? Let's start with this one. That's going to take a minute. And we expand this up. When we take a look at a tornado in a bottle, where basically all we see is this hole in the middle, and it forms in there. But is that the tornado that's causing the hole in the model, or is there something else that's creating that vortice in the middle? The answer is, this is an effect. This is what they call the wake behind the boat. It doesn't drive the boat. This is the wake. What drives that is actually a force from above it And once it gets started, this is vortice up here that gets going as this liquid it drops inside the funnel or the bottle. And that vortice that you can't see, that force, actually travels in a conical shape. Now, if we trace the path of that cone, it actually forms another cone. And so it's basically a vortice inside a vortice. And that, in fact, starts to drive the liquids inside. The inside angular momentum, which causes the water to spin in the same direction going down into it. So it's really got a heavy stirring stick that makes this all happen. And it's an electrical plasmatic force that, according to the video, has a charge inside of it, which makes sense because anytime you have one thing, where's my pen, going one direction, you have another go in the opposite direction in that system. The differential between that is going to have a charge, plasmatic charge. Keep this in mind. Okay, oops.
I could show you a really good picture of one forming that would demonstrate all that through like a photograph if you want.
Okay, let me finish this one really quick, and then we'll go to that one. What happens is we have this pen. You have this one. My pen. You have this big vortice on the top that we can't see going on, but it actually starts setting up the toroid fields on the sides. Color. So it basically causes it to form on the outside. And on this one, I've got it. And that's a big donut all the way around it. And it's basically the interaction of that toroid being spun here as a result of the limitation of the top of the container, whatever that diameter is, and the diameter of the hole going through the cap. It's these two dimensions, what's here and there, and if they're the right ratio, the tornado forms. If it's not, it doesn't work as well. That's all. There are minor toroids formed as a result of this big one, which sets up your main. There's smaller ones in these, not toroids, tornadoes, let's call them that, right? Vortices form that are minor simply because in the vacuum that's formed in the middle where this thing is spinning, it sets up more vortices. So you have a multitude of vortices in that space of different magnitudes. At the same time, on the other side of the funnel, and it could be just the cap, you have a series of other vortices forming, and it begins, come on with my pen, right there, the big one, which sets up the interaction of when the water comes out, and you'll see the stream of water make a swirly pattern outwards. And each part of that water or that field will also have a vortice. So we have multiple, it may be a multiples of vortices coming out, not quite as pretty as the vortices going in. Erase. Move it up. The point that I wanted to get to is if we take a neodymium magnet and we lay it on a magnetic field plastic that shows the fields, we start seeing these toroids form, and we see the vortice indicate, but we see these lines and we think, oh, it's just, they're just fields that we can't quite see. Well, that's part of it. But in between those, where the pieces of magnetic material that's in the plastic is reacting, there's a space in between. Well, to have a space, you have to have something going on in there. And that's, once again, if we look over at this picture to the side, and I've erased that square right there, I just cut that out and went over to that picture. You have the same vortices forming in the magnetic fields as we see them, that are little eddies that push the magnetic materials of the plastic indicators, the stuff that shows the fields. It's basically iron filings in an oil solution in between two sheets of plastic. It just shoves them away because you've got that vortice forming. Okay, I will stop share. Go ahead, Cleve, show your picture. And you'll need to unmute yourself too. Yes.
Okay, so what you're talking about, how they're forming the vortices, it's kind of like a rope winding up, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's like little
Yes.
tiny little vortices are wrapping around, bigger vortices are wrapping around those tiny ones, and up and up and up, and they string together in two main streams string together at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the other side of this forming, there's an opposite one as it goes
Yes.
down, and that should your twist going down there. But that demonstrates exactly what you were talking about. And
Correct. And what you end up, I don't know if I can.
I'll just keep going. That's what you end up with.
Mm-hmm.
Nice clean one.
A nice clean one all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, that's about 7 foot.
Wherever the surface of the water is in your tube is going to be where the vortices form to form that central tornado in there. And you'll have some limitations just because of the container, but it's pretty straightforward. When we take looking at our static generator, we're going to be looking at that line of demarcation between the liquid and the air. And there'll be the same type of thing when we look into the plasma toroid fields.
Yep.
Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive tornado in a jar there, by the way.
Oh, I've got little ones as well that I use for structuring the water for my drinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my 3D printer I was going to show you. Oh, here's one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the magnetic spinner, this one. I've got a couple of neodymium magnets spinning down here and a stirrer up here. And it makes the water so silky in your mouth. Like it's just different altogether.
It's different altogether. Yeah, we were talking yesterday, the Japanese in our industry of koi, they say it's making water. And when the water first comes out of the pipe, it has a harsh feel to it. It doesn't feel comfortable. And then after a while, after it's gone through the filtration and the fish have adapted to it and the salt levels are correct, it has that very silky feeling. And as soon as you get to that point, you have less problems with diseases with your fish. They're happier, they feed better, they grow better. But in the new water, they don't like it very well.
Correct. And plants and everything does better on this water. Same as Gans's water. Everything just does better on it.
Yeah, so they're starting to realize that water can hold memory.
Yes.
Which is kind of an interesting property. It's one of those. It's a liquid crystal.
I'll go into this another.
Explain that one. Explain that one.
The vortex, an implosion motor, I've been trying to get them self-running or take the energy off, and that was before the days of getting involved with the plasma group. So now I'm realising probably more how to get the plasma energy out of it.
Right.
That is sorry.
Yeah. When I look at it, it looks like just too many vortices on it.
No, they're sucking.
When you say you have,
they're all on a suck. You got 5 main ones going down from the top, running right through, and these ones on the outside are suckers to feed more in. Because what you're doing, if I find a better picture of the top, perhaps. Oh, there's the top. So as you got the fluid comes in and it travels around and it travels back to here, it's circling inward all the way down, right? So you need to actually feed, although it does work to some degree, but it's like a choked motor. It's just idling. So how you feed it so it feeds itself is that you have it suck more in from the outside here.
Right. Okay.
And so as it's more,
you're setting up a multiple Venturi setup with that.
Yeah, it's 5 tornadoes in a jar, basically. So I wind these around at different RPMs and different things, either with air or this one's been in water, pumping water.
You just put 5 turbochargers together, huh?
Yeah,
basically.
We're going to slap that onto our race car and enter it into the next Indy 500.
Yeah, anyhow, I can go into that another time, and I've had about 8 versions of it so far. But the interesting thing, Fraz, is the air coming out of this thing pops just like you put your hand over an exhaust pipe of the car. Pop, 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 pop. That's how it comes out the exhaust of this.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I'll go to the next one. Right? Yes.
I'll stop sharing.
If you'll stop sharing, you'll stop sharing.
Do that. That's how I do that.
Oops. I'm moving too fast. Go to photo, pick up another photo. And which one do we want next? We want the one with the bug on it. That one. So what we started out with was on the left-hand side where it says bottle. That's basically your tornado in a bottle design. We go from there and say, if I take the equivalent of a jigger and I want to do the same thing, what are the vortices on it and how do they set up? It basically shows that on the upper right-hand side, over here we have our vortice forming, and it spins around the top, and because it's...
You got to check your mic, Fraz, check your mic. You're really staticky, like it's loose.
Okay. Flipping mics over. Does that help?
No, you sound like a rubber band, like you're speaking with a rubber band.
Okay. Is that better?
No.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Let me unplug this one.
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear it? Oh.
No, you still got a rubber band sound.
That's interesting.
You sound like a robot.
Okay, let me stop share. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, you sound like a robot.
That's terrible. Because we're now on to the internal mic.
Let me see if I stop my.
We're away.
It'll take a minute for us to get the pictures up. Let's see. I want the one with the bug. Coming up. So anyway, what happens when we have, when we left off, we were playing with the jigger, which has got a shape at the top, comes down, around and back, a little hole in the middle where the water comes out. We have this vortice actually starting outside that creates the center vortice, which is that double coil that we talked about earlier. It's like two ropes twisting on each other. But what comes out is a very erratic, but it's actually spinning, and there's smaller streams of basically the rope untangles from above when it gets down to the bottom. So you may have one stream or two streams or three streams coming out the bottom. And so it just sets up a difference. What happens, because you have this swirl at the top, you have a pressure differential than what you've got on the bottom. And these two, this one spins in that direction, and that one spins in the same direction. It's just, if you don't quite understand it, grab a toilet paper roll, just an empty toilet paper roll, and take a stirring rod and put between it and swirl it around so that both ends of the rod touch the edges of your toilet paper roll, and it runs through. And you'll see what I'm talking about. You end up with a fulcrum in the middle. That is what we're looking at. Let's see. What happens is we start to set up on the outside of this jigger a plasma coil with swirl. All right. And depending on the direction of rotation on the inside determines the direction of rotation, possibly, of the main toroid on the outside. So that's just a big donut that's formed all the way around that jigger. And the point of interest is right at that spot. In your tornado in a bottle, it would be at the top of the liquid. In our plasma systems, it's the top of the container. It's that spot right there. And we were talking earlier, if we increased that height a little bit and made it thicker, you might change where that toroid forms on the outside. So you could possibly raise and lower by making this center place thinner or thicker, because it's going to be driving right there at the sweet spot on the inside of the toroid. And as we explained earlier, you can take, if you have basically a big donut, and it was one that you could spin the skin of the donut around the outside of the crusty part of the donut. If that would spin around the light fluffy part in the middle, if you spun it on the outside with a certain RPM, it would travel at one speed. It would be set up. But if you set it up on the inside, you could get it faster. You get the whole thing spinning. But anyway, that's the thoughts. But going on with our example here, this one page that I'm working on, we're now going to look away from the things, right? The stuff that is above is physical forms that we can show vortices really easy. So below the red line is going to be things that we find in nature that operate similarly. So we're gonna, and this is my carrot. And carrots grow in the ground. And you have that line, which would be the surface, and part of the carrot sticks up usually, and the rest of it's down in the ground. Looks just like a tornado. The purpose of that root is to take water in from the bottom, and nutrients comes up through the bottom and feeds the top of the carrot. And at the same time, it stores up starches down here in the bottom. Oh, there's my orange. It gets thicker and thicker and thicker with what we now know as GANs, but it's basically sugars and starches that build up stored up energy for the carrot plant. So we take a look at the top. So you got water coming up this way. We end up with a similar vortice forming at the top with water, but it's actually inside, mostly inside the leaves of the carrot, the stem and stuff, and that moves the water from the bottom up to the top. And when it gets up to the ends and the tips, the leaves of the carrot, we have a process that is known as transpiration, where water vapor actually leaves the leaves. Has to. That's what causes the nutrients to come up. I'll call you back, Leo. Anyway, the leaves basically convert sunlight, which is the photons coming in from the sun, and it takes in CO2, strips off the carbon molecule, sends it to other places in the plant, and releases oxygen off on the side. So the carbon can either be used right there in that where it comes into the plant, or the plant might, in fact, move it to other places in the plant where it's needed. It's just the system works. You've got carbon dioxide coming in all the leaves so that it's readily available, and you have, that would be going in, and you have the CO2 coming out in the other direction. You know, it's the oxygen, say the O2, is leaving. So it's a nice transfer system, and what it does is you've got these vortices set up again, similar to what we had with our funnel. Okay, so we go over to our bug. This is a beetle or a bumblebee that shouldn't fly, but it does, because on its wings, once again, it has these structures there, right there, right there, millions of them on the inside of their leaves. These, we've called them the rook, but it's basically a physical toroid, physical vortex shape attached to the bug's under wings. What this does is it sets up the air vortices around them that gives the bug lift and flight. Well, how come? What we're looking at, back to this thing, is to set up what I saw, a vacuum up here and a pressure here. So what happens is the bug gets sucked up into the air because the way he's got his shapes set up. But what I found was interesting was when you have the bugs sitting on the ground, it has this rook design, these little carbon vortex shaped things that don't move. Looks just like, in the same direction as our tornado in the bottle. Okay? In very gross comparisons, there's similarities, which has the same look as the carrot root in our plants. What we are looking at doing is to figure out where in our structures this baseline is. My color, like in our caret, that's the ground line, and our baseline, which actually is at the top of the jigger, okay, and in our bottle with the tornado, it's down there where the hole is. Well, I'm sorry, it's the top of the water on that one. What are the similarities when we go to our static generator for any kind of spaceship type of lift? And that's where I'm at right now, is at least looking at what are the redundancies, how many, and how many different levels of it do you have to have, or can you have one and have stabilizers added on? It does more make it more stable? Does one inside of the other multiply the forces of these toroid with vortice interactions? We have been looking at setting up that are toroids are there. They set up in nature automatically when we get our field set up on the inside to match. Dictating the size of these is basically how fast the liquid or the air or the plasma travels through the system. So we can increase the efficiency of the tornado in a bottle and any of these others by increasing the field strengths at the sweet spots, wherever that happens to be. And I'm looking at basically the top of the liquid, the top of the jigger, the top of the dirt, and in the case of the bug, where it attaches to his shell, the hard shell of his wings. These are the commonalities. And so commonalities here, 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 and there at the top of the liquid. Okay, stop sharing. See if I have any more that's kind of fun. Bring up another photo. Let's see. I think we're ready for this one. Wrong one. Share. That was the right one, but it's the wrong direction, that's all. Coming up. We want that one. So in our system that we're looking at, we have the top of the copper pipe, which sits there. We have whatever we build as the static generator with the fields coming through down through the middle. So we have that coming in, which is basically the setup of the vortice, which sets up your toroids. So we get into what this part is, the antenna in the middle. It's really, really important because that center wire, when we set it into this formation, has a tendency to have an AC current running back and forth in the middle of it. We go to our artificial ground, which would be your lead GANs, your battery, whatever at the bottom. It's basically an electron storing spot. It takes the one direction out. And as soon as it's gone, of course, you end up with the other going the other direction in the reverse, and it has to be released, and so it goes out the top of the antenna. As soon as that happens, and that transmission happens, you end up with a vacuum inside that wire or that antenna, so it brings in more from the outside. So you have this rush in. So we're going to have, just because of the nature of the device, a pulse in the middle, like a heartbeat. We then take a look, how do we increase the efficiency of that? And we slide a tube, gentle tube, over the wire of the center, and this is one of Zane's contribution. He contributed this to it. Seal off the bottom, and this allows you to fill with your GANs. And you want a GANs on the inside that is very alkali and has the properties that are clear in the lymph side of the equation in this, because that's the center core of it. The outside of that plastic tube, that can be then capped off when you finish, and there might be like maybe adding a little bit of aluminum foil into the middle, like a tiny little bit, and a little bit of GANs, not GANs, caustic. I would say just a crystal of the NaOH, just drop it in and cap it off.
Excuse me. What do you mean by lymph? Can you clarify that for anybody else? I understand what you're saying. Could you clarify it, please?
Sure. When we go into lymph, we want something that you could either, if you're talking about this being a personalized engine, which we are, you would either be extracting lymph from the human body itself and working, or doing a GANs of what was basically the waste of the lymph, which would be urine. So you would use the washed GANs of urine, which has a very CO2 viscosity to it. Look at the CO2 GANs viscosity of it, but it has the emotional attachment to the person that's operating it. This is the connection from on the inside of the device to the outside, which would be the human being that's going to be driving the ship, because it's all mental control. When you get it all washed, you've got the salts washed back out of it, and you've lost some of the alkalinity by adding a little more caustic back into it with a little bit of aluminum foil. This sets up the free hydrogens and hopefully building up a ready supply of H3 to run the rest of the system. This is the spark plug of your Starship engine, is that center tube around your antenna wire. The next layer is where the copper coil is. It's nano-coated. It comes through it. And that's just regular old nano-coated copper wire all the way through. And there's the outside of the copper pipe. There's the tube down the middle. Your copper wire is there. The GANs that we need on the inside is going to be your CH3. To make it better, it should have hemoglobin in it, because it's more of the blood half of what's inside you. And so this is building it on the same idea as the human body. The lymph system is separated from the blood system, and so those are separated. And that, in with the extra iron, the ferrite, the iron, the CH3 iron, sets up your ferric coil, which is part of this. Just fill that all over the GANs. And at this point, I'm going to say that's going to be the heaviest of the GANs in the CH3s, right off the bottom. You could also have some of the amino acids off the top mixed into that. And that in your jewel ringer circuit is that ferrite core. And this is where your energy is. This is stripping off of the electrons and stuff that fires everything else out of it. This is the exciter. This is the multiplier. And where that major pop is from that Joule ringer circuit is right at the top as it's coming out, is where your vortices start to form. And it's right at that sweet spot in where it's at, when we're doing the numbers on the toroids, that's the addition, the 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equator line. There's one on the inside of the toroid, and there's one on the outside. Everything else is doubling and is doubler numbers, and then there's higher mathematics of it where you go into the harmonics. You go from 2, 4, 6, 8 to 3, 6, 9 multipliers. And we'll get into the next one. Oops. I'm going to swing this thing down. So now we've got set up the flow coming out of our static generator, like so. It sets up at the that sweet spot we showed earlier on the bug and on the jigger and on the water and things. That spot right where the yellow is. The next big toroid, change color, is going to form right there. Right at that sweet spot will be dead center of the toroid, which is, there's the top of your copper pipe, and these toroids form there. We then look to multiply. So we have the one toroid there. We make a medium, that's the small toroid actually, we set up, and we'll have probably a structural, if we're going to do coils and stuff. Anyway, we have the next one, which is a medium-sized one. We have a small one, medium-sized one, and a large one. And one goes one way, one drives the other way, and the bottom one drives the same direction. And what happens is we have an expansion, contraction, and expansion. And it's really, 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 really important, because beyond this first area, these also interact with a larger toroid off the side. We're just building toroid upon toroid upon toroid. Oops. Let's push that down a little bit. That's going to be it. The other thing that I was looking at in our, so go back to our line, which is in the middle, the sweet spot right there. We have the division where above it is like our carrot, and it has its top side. So, and below the ground level, we have the bottom of the carrot, like so. What's at the bottom of the carrot is the massive ground. It's that good old ground that's right there, the GaNs of lead in our mobile units, our flying units, or in the car units, that's GaNs of lead. If it was a terrestrial Earth-based, that would be an Earth ground right there. So we have that shape. So, and I'll get my baseline. Okay. What I was thinking at the next point, after we've got all the coils and stuff in place, it may be time to set up the star formation. And that's with the reactors. And you have your 3 reactors around the base. Okay. And then and those rotate in the same direction. And then you have your upper one, which is your CH3. CuO, CO2, CH, or one of the other GANs is in there. Clear, Frazzle. And that was just the thought. And the reason for it was we're setting up, we have our baseline again. We are trying to set up color, a vacuum in this area would be very similar to that open spot when we looked at the vortices forming above the jigger that gave us the appearance of the tornado on the inside. Where that vortice forms, I draw up here on the top, and spins around, sets up a vacuum in this area. So we don't force ourselves off the planet in a hot mode using flame, such as rockets or jet engines or hot air balloons. We actually set up a cold system that sets up a vacuum at the top, and we get sucked up into the air. Angular direction and motion will then be the interaction of these balls of GANs at the bottom in the star formation, here, here, and here. I don't know at this time if it's just going to be simply thought that will take care of it, or if we actually have to put some form of actuator that extends these down in mid-flight and back up. So if you had landing gears, you break the pattern by pushing these down, and that forms your legs that sit on the planet, wherever you land. Three-legged stools are balanced, they're stable. If you want to take off, you retract your telescoping legs, brings everything back into pattern, and you take off.
I just got one query for you, Fraz.
Yes.
Just while you're there. Sorry to interrupt.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
The vacuum in the system to form the funnel at the top, the vacuum's at the bottom.
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yes and no. It depends on where your center, where your Earth base is, where your planet is. In your Earth-based systems, you have this big planet that you're attracted to.
Yep.
And so it goes everything goes that direction. In the starship formation, that in conjunction with that is your center of your planet. This becomes your Earth, and your vacuum forms in the opposite direction, because if that's your center, let me erase all. If that's your center,
yep,
and then that's your whole Earth.
Yeah. Okay. So
your vacuum.
So the visualization then that would be that the funnel, the open part would be at the bottom, and because that's what causes the funnel is the low pressure at the other side.
Right.
And the fluid.
But we take a look at
the fluid.
Yeah,
things get to infinite speed right down the very center on the atomic scale. They get really fast.
So probably what's going to happen is that at this point we have, which is at the sweet spot in the top of the generator, that line there, that has a vortice that we understand that is similar to the tornado in the bottle. The bottom one down here sets up a vortice, a separate one which is similar to the one that's on the bugs. On the bugs, that one at the bottom causes it to lift.
Yeah.
The one above, it sets up a vortice that causes the water to go down.
Yeah. So what I would, the one on the bug is like the water vortice, but upside down. And the low pressure is then up in the sky, and as you say, that's why it's getting the lift.
Right. It takes a little bit of scratching, and we break it up into, I mean, this one's a lot of mental push-ups to get through it. And if we divide the system, let me put my line back in, and we say, okay, we're going to use blue for gravitational. And that's your gravitational vortice. And we're going to use pink for our normal, which would be magnetical vortice. The shape of them are the same, but the properties of the two are opposite. So what we do is that we end up setting up an infinity right there. And we're basically setting up a field around this whole thing that separates us from the Earth-based field. And one of the things that I was looking at was, if you take your finger and you push it through the air, your finger goes through the air without any problem. You put your finger in the water, and it goes through the water without any problems. But your finger doesn't go through your desk very well. It acts like a solid. But we know that there is no such thing as a solid, only field interaction. So when we go into the smallest part of when we magnify a piece of wood, and we get to smaller, more, magnify greater and greater and greater, and look at smaller and smaller parts, we find out that the wood is mostly space. In fact, there's very little matter in it. But it's the interaction between your finger and the wood that says, I'm sorry, the wood says, you're not the same as me. Whereas water says, you're the same as me, you can come in and play. Air says, you're the same as me, and you can stay and play. But a sheet of metal says, no, you're not the same as me, and you got to stay out. We have a field difference. The charge between the two doesn't commingle. What we're trying to set up in our spaceship is that same differential. So where the Earth is now, down here at the bottom, becomes like your table, and your spaceship, instead of being like the Earth attracted to it, is now like your finger and can't go in. It can't commingle with it, and it repels. We've actually changed the properties of the relationship between the two entities, the spaceship and the planet, canceling gravity.
Hey guys, I hate to jump in, but I need to go to bed. I'm sorry.
No problem.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks a lot. Bye.
You're welcome. So anyway, that's about where I'm at. And let's see if there's anything. Stop share. I have to look and see if I've got one more photograph.
Well, you've given me to think about there at the end of that with the magnetico and the gravitational vortices.
Yeah.
That's a whole new dimension, Fraz.
After I thought about it, I said, I wonder if there's anything that really looks like what I've talked about after I went through the design. And, is there images, artist renditions of things that are similar to what we're building? And there they are. You have on that one right there in the middle, you have that carrot root sticking out at the bottom, and you have an expanded magnetic. Change color. You know, your magnetic is expanded like crazy.
Can you zoom in a little on that, Fraz?
Sure. Whoops. Erase all. I don't know if you can see that. It's just got the little carrot at the bottom.
Yeah, that's better. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. That's about as big as it's going to let me go. But anyway, and what's funny about this particular picture, I found it absolutely amusing, was
the carrot stalk.
The carrot stalk. Right there. It's like, what? What the heck's going on here? It's like, okay, it's starting to gel. And in this case, erase all, as we look at it, it looks like a lot of sheet metal. But when you take two plasma fields and you interact them so that you have one that has a series of crosshatches that goes like so, and you have another plasma field that has a series of crosshatches like that, where those crosshatches are start to blur together, and you end up getting this look like it's solid. You know, you've created the resonance of a solid. And it would be simple to have the resonance of aluminum, or the resonance of a yellow, or the resonance of orange. By just changing that little frequency, changes the property of the shell of your spacecraft. And if we go into the, what the heck was it? It's not the Phoenix project, it's the Montauk and the Philadelphia project. What they were looking at is, can we make it more cloud-like so that we become invisible? You know, we change the appearance of the outer shell. Let's see if I got a white. No. That all of a sudden, the spacecraft turns invisible. Not that it's invisible, it's that it masks its shape because it mimics what's behind it. There it is. You can have the properties of clear. You can have the properties, you know, of glass. You can have the properties of aluminum. It's just what is the vibration of the field interaction. And the stronger the field is, the more in the line of a force field, means that this object here can't collide with that one there. It's like taking two magnets with their poles pointing towards each other and trying to get them to interact. And they say, no, I don't like you. And they separate.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
So that's as far as I've gotten. And hopefully that'll...
Mate, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That's
does that work with what you know of, or what you've learned with what you've been doing the past 5 years with your experiments?
Because the vortices are all about implosion. And as you say, the work of Victor Schauberger. Actually, I'll spell that out for anyone that does listen to this that wants to look him up. It's Schauberger. So I encourage anyone to go and look at his work, because it's life-giving energy. It's a plasma energy that's created by moving fluids inwardly. And what happens is they move inwardly continuously until they reach a speed that they create an enormous suck up in front of it, which feed that, and that's what you're seeing with the vortice in the water, is the suck causing the air to come down through the middle of that energy. and it is plasmatic by nature, and it's life-giving rather than explosive technology, which is life-taking.
And this is, and for those that are reviewing this and critiquing it, I'm fairly neophyte to the information that was just presented, and this was my interpretation of the things that I saw and seeing if we could incorporate them with plasma technology. And by changing the gravitational and magnetic, how it's oriented, and get the gravitational steered away from the planet Earth and to a new center of attraction, which would be above the spaceship or towards the center of the spaceship, then lift occurs because it basically sucks you up into the air, like we see with the beetle in the bumblebee. So, as I say, it's a new thought. It's I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. It's just I'm putting it out there for consideration.
I do have a question for you. When we're talking about that pipe generator and the coil that comes in and wraps around the aerial,
right?
The direction of that wind, which way does it go in relationship? Is it which way do we want it? Is it with the spin of the tornado that we're in? Because we know that the plasma works in spirals. It's a tornado.
It's a tornado, exactly. And so we're basically, as I tell people, you stay in pattern, the system works. You break pattern, and it stops. It's your on-off switch.
Right.
And so it's very easy to turn, to get out of pattern and have your system not work. And a lot of us that have been looking at this stuff, and we're going, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then we look back at really critical at our work, and we realize that we broke pattern. It's like, of course it doesn't work. We turned it off. So that's, it's like, well, I got to find the on switch. Show me the on switch. I know the off switch now. Where's the on switch?
Well, the reason I bring this up, now the direction of it, because I had a thought to try something, and I tried it with the car coils, and I changed the gravitational coils, the larger the hoop and the smaller hoop, the inner ones, right?
Right.
To clockwise windings, and I had the outer magnetico coils anti-clockwise and made up a car system for it. And so far, that's my best car system.
Okay. The question that I have, and that's because, in picturing it in our minds, we don't quite get the same idea. When we look, let's see if I can get my fingers in here. We want to have, in all our exchange systems, be it electrical or heating systems or hot water exchange systems, you want one passing past the other. So you want your magnetic going in one direction and your gravitational going in the other. When you set up your coils, and they're separated by space because we're no longer putting them together, we're actually pulling them apart. Are we keeping in so that when it comes through, it actually maps up one to the other, so you have the maximum contact with, even though they're not apart, they would parallel each other, one going against the other? That's my question. Do they end up going the same direction?
No, they're opposite. One's a left-hand thread, one's a right-hand thread.
Correct.
Now, my other way of seeing this is, as you say, they're not connected. There's the field going between there. Now, what's happening is, with them going in two different directions and crossing over, instead of having a couple of vortices, we're creating a million, quadrillion little vortices, because there's so much. Now, what the thing about fluids is, they always find their way to equal out. So is that actually stirring the pot beneficial, or is it detrimental? This is the stuff that.
Well, that's what that's why I asked the question. If you have them so the wires are heading in opposite directions in the spirals around, one face to the other, one going the opposite direction. And the twist, because it's plasma in direction, still goes the same direction. From the it's the pitch and the catcher's mitt. You know, how is it in through the system, and it sets up the toroid through it.
Throughout the system. Yeah, okay. That's a good way of looking at it.
Okay.
But I know it for me, this is what I found so far. That's my best one, and so putting it out there is I'd like other people to actually have a go at it.
I'm just about ready to assemble my car unit, and the thing that I found that I wanted to do different than everybody else was to change the orientation of how I mounted it in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Most everybody I've looked at has been mounting them horizontally because it's just easier to get them underneath the hood. I have come up to the conclusion that I want my CH3 and it basically being the upper end of the unit. And it's just to keep in line with the star formation and everything else. And so it's feeding down through, and you're getting the reverse. So your gravitational is going in, your magnetic is coming out, and that's magnetic is expanding, and it's creating a larger plasma field by expansion. And it's like your hot air balloon in your gondola. When you don't have it expanded, you've got the weight of the balloon and the weight of the gondola and the engine and everything holding you to the ground. But if you expand the balloon out and make it larger, make the field larger, then your volume to mass, the mass is the same, but the volume is greater, and it just takes that little bit of lift to take your balloon up into the air. And so by expanding your...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to me, that the gravitational one, see, I see that in my mind, the gravitational coil on the bottom and the magnetico on top.
Mm-hmm.
But that's...
But it's where it's going in. But the thing is you're setting up for the expansion. So you want to accelerate the magnetical as fast and as hard as you can towards that. See, when you're going past the H3, so that's the last get off.
Yeah,
is the top of that. Then it expands out. It's the same as having the big propane burner right there at the base of the balloon.
Yeah,
that's your CH3. That's your fuel. That's your burning fuel. That's what's really given in the hot lift. That would be the hot portion of it. We're doing a cold lift, so it's coming up and it's expanding, and then it contracts and comes back down, and it's that coming back down that gives you your lift.
Okay, so how are you going to mount? Which way are you going to mount them?
It's going to be mounted vertically, and it was at that point that I realized that we had to start looking into three-dimensional models and into units, the entire vehicle as an entity, as a complete, because your engine and transmission are running horizontally, and it's coming in from the front to the back. That takes care of that axis, but you want your lift to go up and down perpendicular to it.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be clear. Is that the way you're going to mount them?
No. Well, the coils inside mount like so, but the entire unit, instead of being mounted elongated and laying on its side, it's actually mounted vertical. So it's just like when I'm drawing the static core generator in the other drawing, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. It's the same principle, the same idea.
So you're running up between the earth and the sky, in between your coils. Yes, I got you now.
The idea for your car units, to make them efficient, you have two choices. To get greater mileage, you can either increase the efficiency of how your engine burns the fuel, and that's where the HOH gas units work really, really well. Instead of burning 40% of your gasoline and shoving 60% out the tailpipe, you're burning maybe 80% of the fuel inside your engine and pumping 20% out the back. So you've increased your mileage by more efficiently using your fuel. And the efficiency comes because you're adding more hydrogen and oxygen into the combustion chamber, which converts into water vapor, which, because it's an exothermic reaction, it's hot, expands the water and steam 1,000-fold. So you have more compression, you have more expansion, you get more pow out of your bang inside of your engine. You have more steam inside of that steam engine, because your car doesn't run on gasoline. It's basically a steam engine. It's the expansion of steam, water vapor, that gives you the force that moves you down the road. Let's get real. Then we've got more water vapor on the inside, more steam, and we don't use as much fuel because we don't need as much, so we use less fuel. So it really works out because you're burning your fuel more efficiently. You don't need as much gasoline to get the same expansion inside your chamber. You're limited because your cylinders are only so big. The distance between the pistons and the roof where the spark plug is going to be a set volume, and you're only going to get just so much before that thing travels and goes. So we're just efficiently filling that with hot steam in the form of water vapor from the combustion of hydrogen oxygen back into water.
The denser air would give better push too. The denser air from the water content would give bigger push too.
Right. Yeah. So that is the one way of increasing your mileage. The other way is to decrease your weight. And Ford Motor Company did that with the Priya. You got a fairly good sized engine and really light body and frame and chassis. Everything is really, really light for the amount of horsepower to weight ratio. And your formula cars run with fiberglass, or not even fiberglass anymore. They're using carbon filament. It's really good stuff. Graphite and carbon fiber bodies. It's just really cool, lightweight stuff. And titanium frames instead of aluminum or steel, everything is lighter, and stronger. Very expensive materials to work with. So what we look at is, well, how can we make our vehicles lighter without taking away the mass? Well, in Formula One, they do the opposite, because they want to have the vehicle hug the ground as much as possible, because they get them so light they want to, basically fly as an airplane. They put the spoilers on the back, which puts downward pressure onto the car to push it closer to the track, and it keeps it to the ground. So the faster it goes, the more, because of the aerodynamics, it pushes it onto the track, and you've got your traction. When we start looking at the way we're setting up our car units, we should see it get a little sloppy in the corners, because we're actually getting a little bit of lift. We've lightened the vehicle. And so you're going to have to think about your corner before you go into it. You have to plan each turn. And it's just a matter of learning your driving skills. It's very similar to driving a heavy truck on an icy road. You can travel 70 miles an hour and get home safe, but you have to think about the corners before you go into them. You have to plan ahead, get the vehicle set up to get into the corner. And I've driven a lot of icy roads with all kinds of different vehicles, and after 2 or 3 weeks of just nasty conditions, you get pretty good at slippery roads. And we drive like crazy people up here in America. And so it's just a learning process. And I think if what's correct with what I'm seeing and understanding with the plasma bubbles and the vortices and the toroids, and how we can multiply the effort of the toroid, get those donuts spinning faster, this causes a cancellation of the gravitational force. And we should get much better mileage on our vehicles that stay on the ground. And it gets us one step closer to not needing vehicles on highways. So we don't need to build roads. We don't need to build bridges. We fly over. We just, you now have more space to travel in and less wear and tear in the environment. And if we're using our fuels more efficiency,
we'll repel off of their neighbours, so we can't crash anyhow.
If we set it up right, if we manage to get the field set up so that we're more like bumper cars instead of, crash dummies with our vehicles that we have right now, I think it's be really cool. And what we look at in space travel, if we're going to go from here to, as Mr. Cash says, planet Zeus, we don't want to take 4 million light years to get from here to there. We want it right now, which means that we will have to attain extremely high velocities, which means you don't turn real quick. So we either have to pass through stuff. We have to either look like we're really, really tiny, like a quark or a photon, and go through it, or we have to be one with everything that we come in contact, and it's just like a finger going through the air. We go right through whatever.
Yeah, and inside our little bubble, that time's a different thing. That, like the UFOs they observed doing 10,000 right-angle turns at 10,000 kilometres an hour, things like that. Well, trying to think of the physicist. He's a bit of a UFO guy. He was giving his thoughts on it, that they were in a different time bubble. And he said to them, they probably made a cup of coffee and had a chat and thought about, well, let's stop going this way and let's go over here now, and made a nice little turn. And so that their time period, because otherwise the G-force is just astronomical to try to do something like that.
Well, it's similar. I don't know if you have little hummingbirds down in your neck of the country.
No, not quite.
It's a good thing they're not bigger than they are. These are little tiny birds. They're little hummingbirds. They kind of have a combination of a fighter pilot and a helicopter pilot mentality. And they just and they
appear there and there.
Yeah, they're just all over the place. And if you try to catch one with your hand, it's like, no, I'm over here. No, I'm over here. No, I'm over here. And they play with you. It's like, you can't touch me. You're really slow. It would be the same as you playing with a slug on the ground. It just move, or a turtle. Yeah, turtle, try to catch me. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm over here. No, you can bite all you want. I'm over here. You can't catch me. Turtle and you would be a very easy. Would be a nice similarity as a human to a hummingbird. They have a nasty attitude. They're territorial as heck and ornery little birds when it comes to the feeding stations and who's their babies and who's somebody else's. And they're just fighting all the time, and it's all and they interact at such a high speed it's almost a blur to humans watching them.
Yeah,
and so their idea of time is completely different than ours. They're traveling at 150 miles an hour all the time.
It's really hard to catch a fly, isn't it?
Yeah. The fly says, yeah, right, I'm over here. No, I'm over here. So, I see you coming, I got peripheral vision.
Whether I want to finish my meal before you get closer or not.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'll sit here and eat. Well, it's close enough, I'm out.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. And if what our thoughts are with the type of technology we're building here is that we will be looking at the fighter planes that the military, both, whoever's government is the same as the hummingbird looking at humans on the ground. It's like, oh, cool ship you got here. We'll go forwards, backwards, cycle around you. Go over. Like, how you doing over there? Oh, I'm over here. And to us, it's like child's play. To them, because of their craft and because of their technology, they can't turn, that hard of a G-force. We are not bound with the idea of this technology. We're not bound to Earth gravitational forces. It's not in play. It's completely negated. So we might as well be in open space or in the middle of an ocean in the water. It doesn't matter. There's that buoyancy thing. Whereas the airplanes and vehicles that we have right now that are traditional, they are earthbound, and so it's a different connection.
Well, you've made a really important point in this talk for people that are trying to get their head around this sort of technology and the implications. That the principles are demonstrated in nature all the time, and the bird is a perfect example of the different time period, you know. And so really, and also the way you're now looking at the fields as in tornadoes and vortices, I think is a really good step forward, because I think, you know, fundamentally that's the way that the plasma travels anyhow in spirals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's relating it back to nature, and that's where Schauberger had so many insights on power and things like that, relating it, and
I'm seeing that.
And anti-gravity.
And
so, yeah, I think it's
a lot of the things that people are looking at in this technology is all of a sudden the words to describe it aren't there. And he brought up the same. He says, "How can I explain something you haven't seen? How can you have a concept of something that is invisible to your spectrum? But if you change where your orientation is, it changes your field, and all of a sudden other fields start to show up, the other dimensions start to show up. How do I explain that to you in terms that you can comprehend? Because we can't see them in this 3D environment that we've grown up in."
Yeah, and we've seen it in such a narrow way of looking at things. And once you step out of, like, maybe I don't understand the first thing about it, a whole new world sometimes pops out. And I was explaining to some guys the other day, we got to forget about electricity in all this. We're not talking about electricity with plasma.
The closest we have is the DC current, but other than that, plasma is a whole different thing. We're in the coil benders. We get into the guys that have the big toroid coils that they're building that have resonance and that will cause the magnet to spin, you know, even after they turn the coil off. Because the vortices are in place, they're still spinning even though the power is off, and it affects the neodymium balls even after it's turned off. Well, yes, you have changed the time-space matrix of that particular area, and it's set in motion, and it's going to have that memory of it. And in some cases, you can even take things that have a shape. And I think he was talking about the sunflower. If we took a fresh sunflower and brought it into a room perfectly black, and people who are familiar with sunflowers would go into this black room, and you say, point to where the sunflower is in this room. They had no idea. They would point directly at it. Then they take the sunflower out of the room and have the people who are very familiar with sunflowers go back into the room and say, point to where the sunflower is. They don't know that there was a sunflower before, and they don't know that it's been moved. But son of a gun, they point right to the same spot where the sunflower was, because that energy field is still there. It's still imprinted in that time-space spot.
Yeah.
And that's where these vortices start to form. One of the things that until I just looked at this last set of videos that you guys have been trying to get me to look at, I've looked at whirlpools in rivers. I had only one question: where'd the water go? Where'd the water go? I mean, I can go out to the river with my cup, and I can scoop up a cup of water, and there's no hole in the river. It fills back in. But when we're dealing with vortices, it's gone. I mean, it's down. And now it didn't go down and just lay up against the bottom of the bank. It went someplace.
There's a big vacuum pulling the air down in the middle of it. And the fluids going around all form part of it. Like you say, it's like, I always say it's like string making a rope.
Mhm.
One,
And it could just travel on
two
down
pieces wound around
the
each
river.
other, and then it's a similar two pieces wound around each other. And then those four pieces are wound around another four pieces wound the same, and on until you get two, until you just
If,
end up with two.
if the vor-
Sorry.
if the vortice was allowed to continue for a long period of time, you would have a situation that would look like the sinkholes in underneath a lake, that all of a sudden you've got this whirlpool, and in a few hours the entire lake is drained because there's a cavity below, and it's just like somebody poked a little hole in the bottom of your pop bottle and had your tornado in a bottle situation. There's a void down below. In
Yeah.
the case of the river, it is because the velocity of the river on one side, if it's in an eddy, it basically gets the vortice forming, and it goes down, and then it hits the change in structure, which is the bottom of the river, and then it'll bend one way or the other, or maybe flop around. But it continues back and joins with the river again, so you don't lose the water. But in situations where you have a whirlpool beside a river, like in a pond or a back eddy, you have a hole in the bottom of that. And it's the velocity of the river going by that sets up a vacuum in that tunnel, and everything goes down and through the tunnel through the bottom of the riverbank until it can join up with the river again, very similar to a Venturi carburetor type thing where it sucks it through.
Yeah, well, what
And
I
it's
would actually
continuous suck.
say too is like we get dust devils or whirlies here. You get more tornadoes, but the actual air is going down the middle of that thing and hitting the ground, and then it's spurting up all the debris from that, isn't it?
Yes.
So the real power
And
and flow is downwards and forwards. There's a vacuum forming at the end of that, and it's sucking it down, which is
it's for those that haven't played with those. If you get a chance to go out in the desert or out in the hay fields and stuff where they're forming, and I would use a bicycle. I wouldn't use anything else. And ride out and try to enter into a dust devil. It's a little painful. You'll feel the debris hitting you. A lot of times it'll break up the vortice almost instantly, and because you're such a large shape and it's really narrow at the point where you intersect it, and you're actually interrupting its penetration to the ground. But it is a fun thing because you realize that how quiet it is on the outside of it. I mean, it's very still. You can almost walk within a foot of that dust devil and really not be bothered by it. It's just right there. It's like a tree.
yeah,
But you step inside, it's a whole different
yeah. So all the
different creature.
action's happening in the funnel, but it's only a skin inside that funnel where all the real action's happening, isn't it? And the rest of it's just peripheral currents coming back and forming the top again.
We had friends that were setting up fire tornadoes out in the middle of the desert, and you'd have a large heat source, and they were using very large bonfires, and you'd basically set up a weather system right there. It's a differential temperature and dust and whatnot that it interacts with, and you'll spin off the fire a tornado. It forms a dust devil over the top of the fire. Sometimes it'll get through the fire, and if that's the case, it picks up all the embers and pulls it up into that dust devil, and it moves a short distance and it goes out. But it's a very cool looking phenomena. In forest fires, it's a very dangerous, because a flame tornado in forest fires basically sets everything on fire wherever it goes. It's taking that hot match everywhere. The other device that they built was a large vortice fan system, which was a series of, I believe, 8 or 9, probably 9 large industrial fans, and they were tipped in such a way that they could orient it and get it to do what they want. They were all on gimbals. And then they would build a fire on the inside, to see if they could sustain a vortice. Yeah. And if it was very quiet out and they got it just right, they could get the flame to go, 50 feet in the air from the propane torch in the center. And it's a big propane torch. It's better than your crab cookers or your instead of a couple thousand BTUs, it's probably 50 or 60 at least BTUs on that burner at the bottom. But they really couldn't get the elevation that they had been hoping for. And that was some of the research they were doing to mimic the fire tornadoes of the forest fires. And it was a study that came out of University of California, I believe.
Fluid dynamics.
They had a grand time playing with it, but it wasn't as successful as they had hoped it to be.
Well, like I never had much interest in the way fluids worked, really, other than how they pour thick stuff, pour slower than. But fluid dynamics is a whole science by itself, to which we really don't know a lot, and
No.
People would be really surprised on how a fish swims. Again, Victor.
I thought I knew how fish swam, because I sell them. I have no clue. After we take a look at it and I'm watching them a little closer, it's like,
have you looked at
these guys are kind of jet propelled, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it is. It costs them zero energy to maintain and even go forward in a river. They're just
it's like
water coming into them. Yeah, you got it. I've seen it.
Open my mouth and away we go, or close my mouth and away we go. It's all in the shape of the mouth and how the water goes across their gills and then across their scales. And then the tail is more of just direction. It's a rudder more than in an energy source. For moving.
It flaps anyhow. If you drop a stone into the river and look behind it, what you'll see is the water will come around and it will form an eddy, and then the water coming from the other side forms an opposite eddy, and so you got this interaction of these eddies at the back of that stone, and the fish is basically like a stone, and the tail's just catching these eddies the way the water's running down around the body and forward. So because they checked all this stuff out by putting a dead fish in the water and opening its mouth up on a string, and it swam forward. Tail flipping and all.
Yeah. Rigor mortis hadn't quite set in yet. The other thing I've been playing with is, in my home, I have 2 fireplaces, and I have a gas fireplace upstairs that I use primarily for heat, and I have a wood stove in the basement. And it's getting to be fall, and it's getting a little chilly at night, and I've got there's a hallway that travels through the middle of the building, and then that has a sliding door on it, and then the next door goes to the kitchen, and there's a door that goes back to the hallway that goes to the stairs that goes down to the basement. So basically, if I close the door to the hallway and open the door in the kitchen and crack the door going into the hallway and crack the door going to the basement, I have a parabolic spiral. I have a vortice started, and the room heats, the fireplace heats the kitchen faster that way. And the stove actually pulls cold air from the floor up through. So it's not exactly a direct contact with the basement, it's an indirect, but it still pulls cold air, fresh air from the basement to the gas stove. And then you have this big swirl going. And by the time that swirl gets to the basement door, the heat travels down the stairs and warms the entire basement fairly rapidly. If I start a fire in the basement,
it's getting sucked by the heat above it, by your fire.
And I don't have the door shut to the upstairs, all the heat leaves the basement, and all I get is cold air coming in from every crack and crevice that isn't airtight in the basement. So to be efficient, if I want to heat the downstairs, I have to close off that chimney vent to the upper area. If I heat up the basement and there's lots of mass and there's concrete and rock and, you know, fireplace hearth and that kind of stuff, I get that up to temperature, and that heat will radiate and keep the whole house warm over time. So it's a better long term, but it takes longer to do it because you have to heat the masses, you know, the mass up. But this idea of basically adjusting the doors to set up a vortice
flow, yeah.
It actually goes down, the heat goes down into the basement.
It's sucked down because of, well, firstly, you've got the temperature gradient starts at moving in the direction you want it. It's go hot,
Right.
cold. But then you've got the flow coming up from the bottom, feeding the flow from your basement. And so that's got to suck from somewhere. So you've already got that moving in over there, creating a bit of pressure. More low pressure goes to the low pressure, and away you go. Fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm actually expanding the air by the fire. It's more energized. It's hotter. The moisture in the air is expanding, so it's coming up, it's expanding, and then condensing as it gets colder. But it gets drawn down into the cold is drawing the heat to it, which is you go. How does that work? It's vortices again. It's vortices, and it's really cool. It's really nice and toasty because I can heat up my kitchen quickly now, well, within a few minutes, whereas I'd have to wait for the hot air to push its way by expansion and it'd be over hot in the living room before it'd get to the kitchen. It'd be uncomfortably warm, and the kitchen would still be cold, and the back of the house would be cold. But by setting it up so that it had this circular vortice and it's anti-clockwise, it works great.
If you want a good source of fluid dynamics teachings and information, have a look at aircraft wings and what they've photographed and done with all that stuff. That's quite amazing.
Mm-hmm. But I've worked with, and some of the stuff that I've worked with air-to-air heat exchangers. I've worked with hot water current, counter-current water systems, radiator systems, where you're taking a hot water system that is isolated from another water system and using it to heat and cool one or the other by passing one past the other in opposite directions using thermodynamic, this counter current and flow. And so having that bit of knowledge has really been a help when we take a look at the cache information or the plasma technology and how do we get these things work. And then it almost goes into how gears work and how, your angular vectors and angular momentums work.
Well, hot and cold's another way of saying gravitational magnetico, isn't it?
Yeah, because your cold will be your gravitational, it draws it in. Your heat is your magnetic, which is expanding.
And the giver.
This comes into play when you have a friend of mine had a problem on her fireplace. She had her TV set up on the mantle, and it's a big TV set. It's got a lot of heat on it, but it's not on all the time. And it blistered the wood behind it. Not that it was hot. It was because the moisture. And it's like, why is this? Well, you've dried and expanded the air. It's risen. The cold, heavy air is trying to come now through the wall, and it hits the paint, which is a water vapor barrier. And it is just pushing like crazy, and it just blistered the paint right on out. And it could be even at one point because of dew point, because of the changes of temperatures, because of, the TV was on and off and stuff, that you could actually have water vapor condensate and become water droplets inside that bubble. And then when that heats, it can't go the other direction because it was vapor when it came in, but now it's in liquid form. And you expand it because water, when it's heated even a little bit, will expand.
Steams, yep.
Stretches it out. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And So it was like, oh, darn. So she has to move the TV set, and she has to get a little better water vapor. Well, the problem was the chimney was leaking, but the moisture was in the wall. It wasn't on the outside of the house. It worked its way into the wall itself. So we have a dew point problem inside the wall. We allowed to continue would completely rot out the house in that spot. And having the TV set being a warm heat source right there only makes the situation worse.
Big gravitational.
No, you just put a big magnetical on inside and the gravitation was running in.
Oh, yeah, actually it is. It's big magnetico, and then when it's cooling, it becomes gravitational.
Yes. And the other that's like, it's a gradient where you have a higher concentration of water vapor on one side. You dry it out on the inside, that water vapor is going to try to equalize. So it actually has a push also. So there's a lot of things that were working to cause that problem when we take a look at fluid dynamics.
A lot of things we don't think about in normal life, isn't there?
No, and it took me a while before it finally sank in what she was saying, and she was absolutely correct. She says the heat is drawing the water in. It took a while to get it through my noggin what was actually happening, but in the short explanation, yes.
Could leave the telly on and don't turn it off.
Yeah, it'd be a little better. Have the and keep the inside of the building warmer and push everything backwards the other direction. Move the dew point to the outside of the building. But that's what she's having to do right now to save the wall, is to keep the fireplace going and basically drive the moisture out of the wall in the form of expanding water vapor pushing outwards. And then when it gets outside, of course, it condensates and runs down the outside of the wall.
Yeah.
But I went up and actually patched the roof for her.
Well, I think that I need to get going, buddy. So,
well, the follow-up should have been entertaining for anybody who wants to watch, and we really appreciate you spending the time with us. And one of these days we'll get this thing cracked, and who knows, we'll be flying from point A to point B in 0-point time. Just think it and you're there.
Yeah, it's going to be marvelous. The future is very exciting.
Yes.
And it's not that big a leap once you actually understand this stuff. It's not that big a leap at all.
No, it really isn't. And it'll cause some societal changes, and it is very similar from going from the horse and buggy to the internal combustion engine. It's very similar from going from having a block of ice in an ice box to keep your milk cold to having an electric refrigerator. So
and being able to on an airplane and change continents in a few hours.
Yeah.
That was,
all these things, there's change. And we go from, agrarian society to an industrial society, and currently we're in the post-industrial boom. We're actually collapsing our industrial base because our population is getting older and it's shrinking. So we have this contraction back down. We had the expansion in the magnetico, literally their industrial age. We're coming back to a gravitational pull to, can we do it something different and better? And then by going into the plasma technology, the plasma era, we can now expand that field even greater with more dynamic changes. So it'll open up for new industry and new technologies and new applications, because it's better than a block of ice in the living room, let's keep your beer cold.
Well, yeah, it's a whole new next level of understanding and science and technology, and the benefits are
it's going to take
the changes.
It's going to take a lot of us it's going to take a lot of us as educators to kind of settle the feathers down and say it'll be okay. It's going to be different, but it should be a whole bunch better and a lot more fun. and maybe a little less headache, but there'll be new problems and new challenges, and a bunch of really cool new things coming along the line. And as I said to folks, I says, boy, I've been waiting for something that's going to make the iPhone, be an ancient technology. I'm tired of it. Or I'd sure like to have something better for a pair of shoes, because I'm wearing mine out way too fast. So where's the next great thing? I mean, we had our IBM computers and our Apples. We're a photon computer, for crying out loud. I want some more speed. I want it faster, better. And
I want to do a bigger high jump. Yeah. Just stick some magravs in your boots.
Yeah. So we have to change the technology to go to the next level. We've expanded as far as we can in the industrial age thinking, in the fossil fuel thinking, in the electrical thinking.
Yeah.
If we can then do as efficiently as the trees and the fishes and these things, and master the toroids and the vortices and the plasma, then we might evolve into humanity might evolve into that shape or that mentality that we are in harmony with the whole planet. That we're not outsiders to our own world. That we're antagonistic to it. That we're actually in tune with it in the give and take of things. So it's going to be kind of fun. It's going to look nice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fundamentally think that people are all good at heart, and it's only fear that really crosses them up mostly. And when the fear of not being able to know where your next meal is, or your sustenance is going to come from, or whatever you need, and technology can provide all that to everybody. There won't be any more conflicts. There'll just be a cooperation between humans.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like, your food should be like the river. In the line that you just take what you need and that's it, and it goes on. And you don't need to have a big freezer, holding, 20 tons of food just in case, something bad might come along. You realize that the river is always running, and, the plasma stream is always running. We just haven't figured out how to tap into it yet as humans. The trees have figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why can't we? And so that's what I'm looking at.
With people like yourself, I think we're marching pretty quickly to understanding it, and working together and experimenting with this stuff now, and pooling our knowledge. I think we got a very good start.
Yeah, as I realized when Douglas brought his machine online, that we were going to have to quit playing and poking and hoping with our designs and start to think about what is going on in the systems, how they actually function, and then try to predict what we want it to do in the line of it as a device. And then simplify that down into the smallest scale in the fractal idea of things. Because as we're finding out in the plasma technology, size really doesn't matter. No. It's how you manipulate them, it's how you get them to interact with each other to produce another substance, or how you excite them into enlarging or contracting to give you lift or give you forward motion or to heat or to cool. It's a whole, all these things have to be taken in consideration, and then say, okay, look at it as a whole. Where do you want to take off of that infinity loop? Where do you want to tap into it to give you what you want? You go away from it, you're going to get it into a solid or a liquid, you stay in the loop, and you might get electricity wherever you tap it off of. If you get it set up the other, you get in flight.
Well, that's the thing about this, isn't it? You know, a popular term for this is 0 point, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's a total misnomer because it's an everything point. Once you crack this field, it's what you draw off of it or choose to want to draw off of it will provide it.
Mm-hmm. And as I say to people, you have lots of energy around you. It's like there's a lightning bolt striking every 5 minutes somewhere on the planet. I don't need the whole lightning bolt. I just need a little bit of charge off the outside edge. I just need a little bit, and I don't want to get burned. I don't want to get too close and get off. I just want a little bit.
There's something like 8,000 an hour going on around the planet, or a minute or something stupid. 8,000, I think it was. It's surprising. There's a vast amount of energy.
There was the talk of what a lightning, a spark, a 1-inch spark. Let's look at my finger up there.
20,000 volts an inch.
20,000 volts. Oh my goodness. 20,000 volts in an inch. And how many times have we seen a jump like that? You know, it's like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
20,000 volts. I only need 12. I only need 12. I can't get 12, you know, with snapping my fingers, but there's 20,000 between my thumb and my finger. As I say, at times I feel like a stupid monkey, you know, it's like there's so much available, and yet we just don't know how to tap in that.
Yeah, we got so many hints and hints, it's putting it together. It's like this enormous puzzle.
20,000 volts, right there. What in the heck am I going to do with 20,000 volts? You know, and I only need that much. So as I say, don't get greedy. You don't need the whole lightning bolt. You only need just a little bit.
Oh, that's at 15 bars, by the way. It changes. Like under vacuum, you can have 20,000 volts, like, you know, that far, or that. Right. But yeah, that's at atmosphere.
It's atmosphere. So anyway,
15.
Nice talking to you.
15 pound 1 bar. That is. Sorry, I got it wrong. 15 psi. Good talking to you, Fraz. And thank you very much for this. I've recorded it, so I guess we'll be uploading it to something, and let me know where you want it put on, and I'll do that.
Okay. Go ahead and stop recording.
All right. Just a sec.